Hello again. We often see little news items suggesting that members of ethnic minorities in Britain find it hard to break into this or that profession. The legal profession is one which I've seen mention of a number of times in recent years, it being suggested that it's very difficult for members of visible minorities to become barristers. Here to begin with is a simple question. Since we know that visible minorities make up between 15 and 20% of the population in England and Wales, what percentage of those called to the bar last year belong to this group? Being called to the bar means passing both the academic and vocational components of legal study. They're the things that enable you to be qualified as a barrister. Anybody want to guess? Lower than 15 or 20% or higher? In fact, no less than 60% of those called to the bar last year in England and Wales belong to an ethnic minority, a visible ethnic minority. As I say, they were black or South Asian origin. Over half. White British people called to the bar are now very much in the minority. In the description to this video, I provide a link to the statistics which are furnished by the Bar Standards Board. I will not explore further what I regard as simply extraordinary, that white people in England and Wales are now in a minority when it comes to being called to the bar, something which I regard as personally as an awful reflection on how the country is running these days. But anyway, I'd rather look at the complaints of ethnic minorities that there is still prejudice against them in the legal profession. Having been called to the bar, newly qualified barristers still need to spend a year or so as pupils in an established set of chambers. They work under the supervision of an experienced barrister. Until they've done that, they can't practice themselves in court. It's here that problems start, because the complaint is that there is a culture in most firms of barristers which discourage black people from being admitted and makes them feel uncomfortable if they are allowed in. The impression one gets is that this culture relates to such arcane matters as which direction around the table the port is passed, and stuff like that privately educated white middle class men are more likely to know than a black person from a housing estate. This isn't what it's about at all. To understand the real nature of the difficulty, we have to look at a black man who did become a barrister and then went on to take a master's at Harvard, and after that became an MP. He was also at various times Minister of Higher Education and, almost incredibly, Minister of Culture. One of the things that people in barristers' chambers do not want to do is to employ somebody to work with them who is embarrassingly ignorant or makes utterly mad accusations of racism. That's going to be a nuisance for everybody. It would make life difficult for all the other people in the office. Generally speaking, in offices or schools, barristers' chambers and other places, professional places, conversation turns to current affairs. People chat about things other than work, obviously. So conversation might turn to the election of a new pope or discussion about Marie Curie. Nobody wants to have to explain simple things to a new colleague as though he is a child at primary school. It would be a bit annoying if you had to do that. I don't much care for spending time myself with stupid or ignorant people, and I prefer to work with people that have a bit of general knowledge I can have a conversation with. I think most of us feel that way. Just imagine if you were sitting in the office one day and a new pope was being debated by the cardinals in the Vatican, and you speculated whether the smoke would be black or white from the building where they were meeting. As most viewers will know, when the cardinals have reached a decision, white smoke is sent up, And if they can't decide yet, then the smoke is black. This is a really old tradition at the Vatican. Suppose you were talking about this and a black colleague accused you of racism because you had mentioned black smoke. Yeah, this sounds really funny. It's exactly what happened in 2013. David Lammy, formerly Minister of Higher Education, saw mention of the colour of the smoke at the Vatican, and he accused the BBC of being crass and said they were speculating on the race of the next Pope. Seriously. Just try and think what an embarrassing scene that would make if barristers were chatting about this in their office and suddenly their new black colleague jumped up and accused them of being racist for mentioning black smoke. Or suppose that the conversation turned to Marie and Pierre Curie, and you discovered that the new person in your office was muddling up Marie Curie with Marie Antoinette. That he thought Henry VII came after Henry VIII as King of England. Or what about learning that he thought that red Leicester was a blue cheese? I provide links in the descriptions to this video showing David Lammy's pitiful ignorance about these very matters. When we hear that black people are encountering problems with the culture in barristers' chambers and that this is preventing them from getting a place once they've been called to the bar, this is what is meant. Those people who interview prospective pupils want people who not only know about the law, but are going to be able to join in ordinary everyday conversations and get on with everybody else. They don't want some fool without any general knowledge who will have to have everything explained to him in the simplest conversation, which isn't concerning work. They don't want somebody who will accuse them of being racist if they mention the colour of the smoke during the election of the Pope. The difficulty is that some new universities are now churning out millions of law students who can pass examinations and learn about law, but are appallingly ignorant about anything else. These are people with whom it would not be possible to have any sort of conversation about general matters or current affairs. I've seen many such individuals in schools and colleges. They can be very highly qualified, but I'm afraid a lot of them, and a lot do belong to ethnic minorities, are in that category. They've been admitted to universities with fairly low grades, eased along through simplified courses from which they emerge with a 2-2. You cannot talk to them about any ordinary subject that doesn't actually relate to what they studied at university. This is the problem of the culture in barristers' chambers, which is holding them back. It's not about a load of upper-class twits who are discriminating against people on skin colour. It is simply that sharp-minded and well-rounded people want others who are similarly knowledgeable about current affairs and the history of the world, so that they'll fit in well with the atmosphere of an office full of bright people. Law is only one small part of this culture.